Echolocity talking about project prioritization. I will say that this is one of my absolute favorite webinars, and I think the timing is perfect as we head towards end of year and all of the amazing things that we have accomplished this year, and some of which will be rolling into next year, unfortunately, and really thinking about budget planning, annual planning. That's one of the use cases we'll talk about today as we head into the next year. So we'll be talking about optimizing outcomes, reducing the risks, and driving strategic success. And so to go through a little bit about what we're going to be talking about today, we're going to be talking about the challenges associated with project prioritization. Guess what? It's not super easy, but it is very important. And so we're going to be talking about some best practices associated with project prioritization. We'll be talking about specific methods that different organizations use and why some organizations might use one method versus another. And then we'll actually talk specifically about a couple of use cases and tools that Echolocity and our team has implemented for some organizations. And then we will have time for questions and wrap up. If you have ever been on a webinar with me before, you definitely know that I love questions. Please do not hesitate to interrupt. You can raise your hand. You can put something in the chat. Would love feedback. But with that, I am going to go ahead and get started talking about project prioritization. To get us rolling, I'm just going to go ahead and share a couple of survey results from the PMO Outlook report. What is one of the biggest challenges that you face managing projects? Now, this is interesting, right? Because the topic of this presentation is project prioritization. But when we are talking about project management, project success, etc., it is the number 2 result for the most challenging thing to do when managing projects. And I will say that the first one is resource management, which we will also be touching on today, because project prioritization goes hand in hand with what resources are available. A couple other notable: visibility and reporting on project status and project health, and then also project financial management. Think about over budget and or lots of change requests and managing all of that. But project prioritization, this is what we're going to be focusing on today. So hopefully you are in the right place. Which element of project prioritization is the most challenging? Again, coming directly from that PMO Outlook report: aligning projects with the corporate strategy. Assuming that there is a corporate strategy and that there are goals that are articulated and that people know what they are. Accurately scoring the value of portfolio projects. Everyone loves estimation, right? Forecasting, super, easy. No, it's not. And that's why it continues to be something that is challenging. Do people really believe that what you're saying this project is going to deliver for value really is the case? Scenario planning, modeling scenarios to optimize the portfolio value. So many organizations, we call it crawl, walk, run here at Echolocity, but if you think about it, oftentimes when we talk about project prioritization if you even do it in a formal way, all it is a yes or no approval for a project to continue on and to be put into place, let alone the concept of how is that project coming in going to affect other projects that have already been approved are already in flight. So today, one of the things we'll be talking about is this next one, and the largest, you'll see this is 33%, most challenges: saying no. Saying no to some projects in the portfolio. It is such a critical skill that we see lacking in so many teams. It's like, if we spend all this effort to submit the project, therefore we must say yes. No. One of the actual measurements, if we think about PMO maturity and some of the assessments we do for organizations about project management organizations and their maturity, is, do they say no? Right? Do they say no to projects that haven't started yet? Right? When I go in and I see that like 99% or 70 or 80% of projects are approved, no, that means that something is wrong. You're either not catching them early enough or something happens. And then the other piece of this is that, guess what? Things change. We need to be aware of some costs, saying no to some projects that are, started, but they're just not the highest priority anymore. And then last is tracking the value of the portfolio. So thinking about, Do the projects that you are actually investing your time and limited resources on, are they going to get the value? Did they get the value that you were anticipating? So again, these are some of the reasons that project prioritization is challenging. Limited resources, limited time, limited budget, limited people, competing stakeholder priorities, whether that's your executive and leadership team, all have differing ideas about what's most important, different teams, whether it's marketing and finance duking it out or sales and customer service, uncertainty in long-term returns, right? If this project goes live, is the value of this project, is it going to immediately start, or is this a longer term investment? And how do we measure that? How do we feel certain of this? And how do we not waste time doing a whole bunch of forecasting and get stuck in analysis paralysis versus moving forward? Balancing the urgent things that have to happen ASAP versus the critical, important things to invest in your company and projection forward. And then honestly, we talked about this one first. We'll talk about it again and again and again. Lack of clear organizational objectives. What are the goals? What are we shooting towards? Are we all rowing in the same direction, let alone the same cadence? And you may, if you're a project manager, feel sometimes like you're a firefighter. And so what happens if we don't prioritize projects? Or if we do it in such a haphazard way with only a single person, right? Wasted resources on low impact projects. We have limited resources. We waste them on something just because it was approved. Increasing project failure rates. I was reading something, Smartsheet released something as part of their piece. Over 60% of projects failing. And we talk a lot about this in other ways with our clients, is project failure is not just when projects don't go live or they don't get implemented. It can go live. It can be implemented as a process in whatever this is and still be a failure because it's not getting the return. It's not getting the results. It's not getting. So again, failure is not just a project not completing. Projects can complete and still be a failure. All right, loss of competitive advantage, right? If everything's a no, if you're constantly blocked on projects, you can lose your edge. Fragmented team efforts. Oh my gosh, we're hearing so much about burnout. We're hearing so much about teams feeling like they're chasing their tails and not making progress. Projects are a critical component of that, right? People working on projects and not feeling like they're going anywhere and burning out. And then my favorite, misalignment with strategic goals. You're doing a project, but you don't actually know how it's going to impact your strategic goals, your objectives. Why are you doing this? And more Generation X, millennials, they want to know that they're part of an organization, that the values are aligned, and that what they're working on matters, right? So it's important that we provide that vision as an organization. And when we're prioritizing projects, it's not just the loudest person, the highest paid person in the room, those hippos, but it is aligned to the strategic goals. So today, as we're talking about project prioritization, I want us to stop and I want us to think about what we mean when we say prioritization. We need to start with what success looks and feels like. If we are prioritizing projects correctly, what does that feel like? And defining our goals accordingly. So we're going to get into how we do that later on in the presentation. So for now, I'm going to keep going. Let's see here. So setting strategic goals. If your organization does not have strategic goals, does not have a corporate vision, I just want to clarify, because this is an important point in the calendar year, right? There's strategic planning and strategic goals, and then there's annual planning and annual goals. Strategic planning is, this is our vision for the next 3 to 5 years. It typically happens every 3 to 5 years. Ideally, your organization has a vision. If you have a PMO, if you have an organization for projects, you probably also have a vision about what your PMO is going to accomplish or what your project, your business unit is going to accomplish, right? But you want to have the strategic, the umbrella, the organization as a whole, and your individual business unit, department, et cetera, goals. Clear objectives, measurable KPIs. There's lots of different methodology out here. So for some of our smaller clients, EOS, definitely OKRs, KPIs, rocks, whatever you want to call them. For some of our larger organizations, Using similar concepts broken down into even more. I think we had one organization, I will call out later on for our use case, had 44 different departments that were all putting in different project requests and things like that. So when you think about prioritizing that, it's really complex. Involving stakeholders, we talked about that just a second ago, involving their stakeholders, especially your key stakeholders with influence, defining what success looks like. What if we are, in 3 years from now, what does it feel like? What does it look like? Where are we going to be? And then prioritizing basing on impact to the long-term strategy. So again, looking out that 3 to 5 years, the strategic plan, where are we looking to go? What is the direction? Okay, so if you need help with setting strategic goals, if you're doing strategic planning, Echo can do, we do offsites for strategic planning for different organizations and can definitely help on that. Ideally, you'll already have those. There's an assumption in this that there are strategic goals. So shockingly, when we're talking about project prioritization criteria, one of the things we're talking about is what is the impact on the strategic goals? Which projects support those key business objectives? We should not be having projects that are not going to support our business goals, right? We're not just doing project work just because. I certainly don't want to do that. And so not only do you need to have it mapped to what are my goals, like why are we doing this project, you also need to communicate that out to your people that are going to be hands on the keyboard doing this project. That helps build buy-in and get momentum behind the projects. Risk. Whenever you're taking on a project, it's so critical that we're focusing on what are the potential risks, what do we not know, and at the beginning of a project, there's so much we don't know. Sometimes we break up projects into a discovery, into a little mini section, and then a longer section because we need to spend that extra time getting a better understanding of our high level requirements, getting an understanding of our budget, getting understanding of the effort that it's going to take for our team to actually adopt this. If we don't understand the risks, if we're not transparent about what we don't know and what our assumptions are at the beginning of a project, we're really going in with blinders and, again, high degree of risk of failure, right? And or getting yourself into a place where you're constantly making, I need additional budget, I need additional schedule, I need additional people, and it's just like this snowball effect. So start risk management super early on. Resource availability. How much effort, both internal, our team members, but also any external vendors, are we going to need in order to look at this project? And do we have them? Are they available? Maybe they're already on 3 or 4 high priority projects. Are we really going to yank them out midterm? So this can be really hard. Some organizations have the aspect of, are they going to contract it out versus no, this is the only person that can help with this. Resourcing capacity and visibility, as we saw way back in the beginning, as to our biggest challenges managing projects, resource management, resource capacity, forecasting, understanding how this new project is going to impact all the other projects. And I want to call out resourcing availability here. This is not just the people that are hands on the keyboard doing the projects, like doing the work on the projects. This is also the people that are impacted by the change that is associated with this project. If you have 5 different projects that are all scheduled to go live, all scheduled to hit one team in a critical moment, that's an issue too. So again, not just the people that need to do the work to get this project off the ground, also the people that are impacted by the change of the project. You need to include them in your resourcing availability and your change. And we'll talk a little bit about works in progress methodology later on, but I just want to call that out here. Project prioritization, dependencies between projects. So this oftentimes comes in IT projects and things like that, where, hey, we need this upgraded before we can do this, or hey, I need this implemented before I can do this. So definitely understanding this project needs to be complete, this project needs to hit this milestone before this next project can start. That changes the priority, because maybe this project isn't the highest priority project, but the one that is dependent on it is. So understanding dependencies, time sensitivity, We're dealing with this right now with compliance, end of year. There's different components to this, which is, you know what, we have to hit this deadline, or there's other risks, issues, et cetera, associated with that. And then stakeholder value. So understanding who your stakeholders are, what influence they have in the organization, and how they align. Honestly, one of the biggest things on whether a project is going to be successful or not is oftentimes the alignment of the sponsor and like their willingness to go to bat for it. So when I think about project prioritization, I do think about whether or not they have a strong sponsor, whether they have a sponsor that's going to go to bat for it so that it can be successful. So anyways, I would just call out stakeholder, who's on the project, who has eyes on it. Are they going to get the executive buy-in? Are they going to get the buy-in that they need? And considering, again, the portfolio of all the other things going on in terms of change, because sometimes the timing is just not right. Talking just a couple of minutes about the different roles in the project prioritization. So there's the leadership or the board if you're a nonprofit or other things like that. The project sponsor, oftentimes this is the budget owner as well, but it's the person that's going to go to the bat for the project, that's going to be able to speak to the business case, that's going to be pushing the ball up the hill. I call out the project manager because we have so many organizations with different roles for the project manager and the project lead or the project owner, whatever you want to call them. Are they involved pre-approval of the project or not? Is there a project manager assigned to do the analysis, maybe get some of the discovery information, help with the business case, or is that really left in the hands of the sponsor, the budget owner, the analyst that's asking for it? Depends on the organization. So I like to call that out there. Sometimes project managers don't come in until the project's already prioritized and you have assigned the team. Other times project managers are included because of the business case analysis and things like that. And I'll talk a little bit about ROI calculation and some of the other things that project managers and or analysts sometimes get involved in. Resource manager, team manager, this is a person that's managing some of the people. That'll be what I call hands on the keyboard on the project, and then stakeholders. And these may be people that are going to be on the project team. They may be people that are going to be impacted by the change that this project would bring about, and or they may be people that are, other leadership components that would have to agree because there's an integration point or something like that. So stakeholders can be very broad. It can include external as well as internal. We have more and more clients right now that are coming in, that do have investors, VCs, et cetera, for smaller companies especially. And those are stakeholders into some of these major projects. Before I jump too detailed into best practices as well as the actual methods, I want to make sure we're on the same page about the project flow and the different components of this, right? So we have the concept of intake, and we'll be talking about what that means for project prioritization. And so we need to identify the potential projects. And then there's an approval and prioritization. Each organization does a little differently. We'll talk about a couple of examples. There's the execution of projects that have already been approved, but still are part of prioritizations. That's important. There's some sort of approval to go live that this is, moving from project world into support. And then there's some closeout process. There's some validation that these team members these people are going to work on this project. And there's some kind of closeout. This isn't a project anymore. This is now done. And then there's a delivery. Today, in project prioritization, I'm going to be talking about return on investment and how we estimate it and measure it and things like that, because this is a critical component as we look at prioritization. If you do not estimate ROI, if you're not measuring it now, you are not alone. You are with the majority of organizations. But I do want to call it out. What do we think we're going to get from this project? You don't have to have a big, drawn out business case and calculation. Some organizations do. We're talking millions and millions of dollars. Others are smaller. It's okay. But at least having a statement of, this is what we're trying to do with this project. This is what we think the project results are going to be. You don't have to overcomplicate it. All right, tons of words here. I'm sorry, I should have cleaned it up, but intake. How do you identify new work? How do you identify new projects? Is it an email? Is there a form? Is there a standardized form? That's what we prefer. it comes up in a meeting, especially with executive leaders. Or maybe you have a project management tool. Maybe you have a solution Echo is already implemented for you where you have that list of projects and intake and things like that. So wherever it comes from, how maybe the water cooler, maybe you're still on site and you hear about this new project idea over the, in the kitchen. How do we identify new work? What's the minimum information that we need in order to be able to keep track of a potential project and start thinking about where it fits with all the other projects? Echo, we recommend standardizing the process. We really recommend developing a template. We've done different forms. We've certainly done it like in a sheet. We've done it in boards. We've done it in a million different ways, but some way of identifying what the project is, who it's going to impact, what are we trying to do, and how does it align to your strategic goals? How is this going to move the needle for the organization? Okay, again, can it be big, heavy, not heavy, can it be very regimented with a large business case and RFP process? Yes, of course, but it doesn't have to be. It can be accessible. There's a concept that I like to talk about, which is progressive elaboration. You can capture the idea, the objective, the concept, and then approve additional resources to really dig in and provide more detail about ROI and about other things. But at minimum, we have to understand, what are we trying to accomplish, right? Who's it going to impact, and how is it going to play in with our strategic goals of our organization? Okay. The example that we use, shockingly, is going to be, a project intake form that is in Smartsheet to ensure that all the relevant information is captured. So minimum information, and then if we need to add additional ones, we can add update requests later on, or a document or something like that that's required to present to whatever your steering committee is. So ideally, you're looking to drive towards consistent data collection so that you can have better strategic decision making, and that there's reduced confusion. Oftentimes we see duplicates where there's multiple different projects with different names and different ideas that could all be consolidated into one concept. When a new project idea comes in, there's a review process, right? So there's some sort of review where it's going to be looked at. Ideally, this is going to be an initial review by a person just to make sure it has the minimum information. Maybe there's some clarification questions, but then it's going to go to some sort of board, PMO, et cetera, a strategic leader, a budget owner, et cetera, that's saying like, yeah, you know what? This is a project we should do. Let's authorize it to continue moving. We have done approval processes that are as easy as one person checking a box. We've done approval processes that had 17 different steps that might need to go through quality, through engineering, through so many different things, right? I want to be very clear. Your project prioritization process methodology needs to be tailored to your organization, your needs. It does not have to be intimidating and super complex. It can be pretty straightforward, but someone should be saying, this is what the project is supposed to do. Someone's reading it and saying, yep, that makes sense. Okay, we're going to move forward. And there needs to be differentiation between, this is an approved project that we're moving forward on versus this is an idea that we may move forward on. So that's really important. If you can, having some sort of approval criteria. So a lot of organizations do this via budget. So they say, hey, Jason, you can approve up to $5,000. Hey, Brian, you can approve up to $25,000 or something like that. If it's within a budget that's already been allocated within a year or something like that, sometimes it can just go there. But oftentimes there's some sort of approval criteria. Hey, this is going to impact our ERP or e-commerce, so this needs to go through IT, security or something like that, so that we make sure that it has checks and balances. So oftentimes the approval criteria is different depending on the size of the project, the complexity of the project, what products or integrations it might impact, or what teams it might impact. So we've definitely seen approval flows where it's different because it has to go through multiple different departments to get approval. Okay? Stages of approval, again, different for every organization. Sometimes there's a multi-step approval process, but there's usually some sort of initial review, some sort of analysis, and then some sort of final sign off. It's important that you have those articulated in your system so you understand what the status of each request is. We'll talk about a backlog and some of that a little bit later as well. So setting up a quarterly review process, new project proposals in a centralized system. So this is assuming that you're doing program increments on a quarterly basis. Project status, visibility, and communication. So we're going to go right into it. Sorry for the words, guys, but you'll know that I'm not reading. We're just talking about it. But please, 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 transparency, visibility, understanding where a project stands. Has it been reviewed? That's something that can be so powerful when you're trying to implement a project prioritization process. One of the biggest early value is that you can actually tell them, hey, this is going to be reviewed within a week or within 2 weeks, or I'll have a response out to you. So committing to having additional communication and or visibility as to where something stands can be a huge value proposition. Lots of different tools for visibility here. We use a lot of dashboards, project management platforms, et cetera, but real-time updates, but also just communicating about what the cadence is for meeting on it. It's okay that you're saying, you know what, hey, we only meet on a monthly basis, or hey, this is a fast track or something like that. Like that's okay. But the more clarity, the more transparency and visibility, the better the system is, the more likely people are willing to put the information in a standardized way so that there's actually enough data to be useful for prioritization. So project status categories, definitely want to know, like, is it under review? Has it been reviewed at all? Has someone actually looked at it? If something's approved, on hold, rejected, lots of different things here. So we use a lot of different boards to kind of say, hey, what stage is this in? Again, it can be as simple as basically new, in review, approved, or canceled, or it can be much more, right? We have organizations that have it in discovery, and then there's this high-level business requirements, and then you have a funding stage, and then you have a initial planning. There's different stages here, but stages and then statuses, like where is it? So trying to keep the team aligned and understand where they are decisioning. Okay, return on investment. Super, super simple concept that gets super complicated very quickly. So return on investment, ROI, is how much is it going to cost us compared to how much we're going to get out of it? And how long is it going to take us to get things out of it? So if you think about it, if a project is, I think I gave the example here, the project's going to cost $50,000, but the benefit is going to be $150,000. That's amazing. That's savings. That's an ROI of 200%. Obviously, we should go forward on this, right? Well, that's where time frame comes in. $50,000 that we have to pay now with a benefit of 150 in 2 or 3 years. And then how confident are we that we're really going to get this benefit? You're making a lot of assumptions about the estimated benefit as well as the time frame. How long is it going to take for those benefits? If you're talking about $50,000 for a year-long implementation of something, and then it's going to take 2 or 3 years to actually get that benefit, you may need to consider other projects, right, with a return on investment that is shorter term, and or costs that might be paid out over a longer term. So ROI is how much is it going to cost? I like to say you want to do all project related costs. So that means external as well as internal resources, because guess what? Like those people could be working on something else instead. So I think it's important, opportunity cost. But most organizations are just focusing on the cash flow that goes out. So just be aware of that. If you're only focusing on how much we have to pay externally, that you're with the majority. What are the benefits? Now, the one thing I'll say here is when you're talking about the benefits, there's tangible, which is money. That's what's like easiest to get through funding and finance and leadership. But there's intangible as well that's much harder to measure. And this is the classic scenario of like, how do we measure the value of something when it's not dollars and cents? So customer satisfaction, customer, benefits, you end up wanting to map it back to money, but just being sure to call out what is the expectation. Right now, we're seeing more and more people doing work management projects. Like one of those things is reduce employee burnout, right? People are frustrated. People are having a hard time. They're going 20 different places in order to find out what their work is. Like it's frustrating. It's burning people out. You can bring it back to something that's a little bit more quantifiable in terms of employee turnover or employee, like there's other ways to bring that back to something that's more tangible, but still list out the intangible benefits of a project whenever possible. Okay, ROI should be used to justify decisions, but it's not the only one. So organizations that are just doing ROI, just doing cost analysis, they're missing out on a lot there. So again, when we're talking of, oh my goodness, that's interesting. So anyways, when we're talking about ROI, it's one of the criteria. Alignment with strategic goals, as well as risks, complexity, resourcing availability, stakeholder buy-in, things like that, all critical components when thinking about different prioritization. So prioritization methods. So we're going to just talk about a couple of these. Eisenhower matrix, the Moscow method, value versus effort, impact effort matrix, weighted scoring model, also prioritization matrix, depending on the way you call it, and the cost of delay. So what if we don't do this? Okay. I will give you my most classic example of the Eisenhower method. It's probably the most common, but it typically is used for tasks versus projects. But I give the example that I think helps people resonate with them, which is a house fire. If you really want to think about, right, urgent and important versus non-urgent, non-important, think about what you're going to take out of your house, right? So your house is on fire. First things first, right? What do you need out of the house? The people and living beings, right? That's urgent. The house is on fire and it's super important. There are other things that are super important that you need as a human, right? Like the ability to sleep somewhere and have clean clothing and food and water. But it might not be urgent in that moment that you save your bed or your clothing, if that makes sense, right? It's important, but it's not urgent. And then something that might not be as important, but is urgent, as in if there's something that's paper, like those pictures are going to be gone. So if you don't have those backed up on your phone or on a device or something, like those become super urgent because they're hard to replace. Not as important as people, animals, but still very important. And then there's things like a couch that it's probably already ruined because there's smoke on it and it's just not, you're not going to be carrying a couch out of a on fire building. Does that make sense? And again, my priorities might not be yours. Maybe books are really high for you, but the concept of a Eisenhower method. So if you think about this for projects, right? Important and urgent. A payroll system, making sure people get paid, or something that's compliance, or something like, critical components, things like that, like end of life for software is a good example. Things that are important for growth, things that are important for having the cutting edge, oftentimes are important, but don't end up being urgent. So maybe it is a new front end or a mobile app or something like that. This is what you need to keep your business in business. It might not be urgent in the moment, but it's going to become super urgent if you are behind and now you can't pay people. And then things that are super urgent, but not as important. This oftentimes can be, customer issues or something like that. That's an individual experience where we all jump on something, but maybe it wasn't as a wider a priority as we thought it was. So the Moscow method is something that we see a lot in feature development. And so think about like product features or software features or something like that, but you can use in projects as well. So must have, should have, could have, won't have. So this is very helpful in the annual planning process and things like that. We've used this several different times for marketing and sales teams as we're implementing either a new CRM or they're looking at implementing different marketing software technology pieces, right? Like these are critical features that it must have, things that we should have because this is like an expectation versus kind of further down the road. When we think about the weighted scoring methodology, this is taking this concept of the different goals or prioritization drivers. So diversifying revenue or customer retention or technical systems, etc. And then you'll see that we've had different weights here based on, okay, like we want to focus on diversifying revenue streams more than we want to focus on the budget. I don't know why, but let's just say this is the example, right? So here's a list of projects. Here's a list of 1 through 5 scores. It all comes out. Here's what the average is, but then here's what the weighted average is based on the fact that not all votes are created equal or not all goals are created equal. And you can see that this can change over time based on, again, different weightings and things like that. This is kind of the Excel version of this, right? We have a tool that we've built out called Straline that does this with a much better UI, and I'll show that kind of just at the end if we have time. But the concept is that people are voting on how this project is going to impact each of these different goals. This is a more mature way of handling prioritization versus just the person saying, hey, this is the highest priority project. All right, guys, one of the most important things in prioritization is knowing how to say no. Saying no with confidence, with finality, and with transparency. So when you're saying no, this project might be something that someone is really excited about. They put in effort, they're passionate about it. And you still have to say no. And so it's important to be empathetic, recognize that this person thinks it's really important, and try to contextualize it in a larger component. One of the biggest things we see is that people say no, but if they are not documenting the decision, if it's not clear that this is a no, it ends up on the backlog, ends up keep coming up over and over and over again because that person really, really, really believes in it. And so some way of documenting and acknowledging like, yep, we understand this is a cool idea, we get it. The answer is no, we're not approaching it right now. And so clearly explaining why is that project not feasible? We don't have the resources. It doesn't align with the strategy as much as some of the other projects on there. The return on investment is too long for where we are as the organization. And then you can even use kind of data, ideally, from your prioritization about the effort on this versus the value of it, or, you know, delaying this, like it's a low risk or something like that, not a strategic fit compared to all the other projects we're approving. Sometimes you can offer alternatives. So one way that we've seen is like if a bigger project is too expensive or too time consuming or something like that, potentially you could break it out. So a smaller chunk and a larger chunk. You want to be careful with that just because you don't want 100 outstanding things. Like you do have to be able to say no and cut the cord sometimes. But sometimes it does make sense to break things out into smaller chunks. So you can totally feel for them. It's their passion. They really want this project, and you still need to be able to say no. As a leader, as a PMO leader, as someone that has to be the gatekeeper of a budget and things like that, we got to say no. Give reasons, bring them back to the larger picture, and then you can either choose to have them break it out or put it on a backlog. Maybe you can push out the decision a little bit longer. So if you have a project and it's like, you know what, we're not feeling it right now compared to everything else on our list, but maybe, but we don't want to approve it yet because and schedule it for later because there might be other things that come in that trump it. Prioritization works best when you're doing a continuous prioritization cadence, right? You're regularly reviewing the projects that are potential projects as well as the existing projects, and that you're changing the priority based on the business needs and the goals and adaptability. That's not what most organizations have, unfortunately. A lot of them just have, these are the approved projects and these are the non-approved projects, right? But recognizing that, hey, there's some projects that we could be putting time towards, especially continuous improvement, change management projects, things like that, that we could pause and do this other thing instead, and the ROI is going to be faster or greater on this one. So ideally, prioritization is a continuous process. It's not a once a year situation. It's not even a once a quarter situation. It's not just based on budgeting that has been done one time a year and like allocated to a specific team. Ideally, it's a continuous dynamic prioritization process with a articulated and/or regular cadence that people know when they should expect responses back on prioritization. Collaboration with stakeholders. So we want to make sure that, especially because most projects nowadays are cross-functional, they hit multiple different business units. Even if the people that have to implement it are on one team, the implementation still impacts other team members. A lot of times we talk about it when we talk about gap analysis and or value stream mapping. Sometimes it's not the individual process, it's the gap, the lag between the two processes that is the biggest area of improvement. So I would just call out that collaborating with stakeholders, looking outside just your individual team to understand the wider audience of, hey, what projects? So some years, guess what? Marketing's going to have more projects than finance. Some years it's going to be really focused on supply chain because there's major supply chain breakdowns. So we're not just saying, okay, you 8 teams, you each get equal different resources, go do what you're wanting. As an organization as a whole, this is our strategic vision. We need to prioritize that. Everyone needs to be coming back. We need to be rewarding people that have that organization view, that broader view, that looking at the forest view, not just people that can only see that tree. Breaking projects down. So whether it's projects like programs, however you want to call it, multi-phased projects, things like that, we want to be able to articulate the value of each individual component. So don't break it down so small that you can't have value in each component. But sometimes for these multi-year, like very large implementations, we do want to break it down. We want to have a completion and then a starting new function and things like that. Oftentimes with backlog, again, the functionality is actually most commonly like product management and feature oriented, but like we put things on the project backlog all the time, right? So it's like, hey, this is a potential project. We want to work on it next quarter, but we're not there yet. We're not going to just say it's approved and then just we are going to do this no matter what. We know that things are going to be constantly changing. So it's going to be in the backlog. We have a tentative plan. We're going to try to move it around, right? We need to clean up duplicates, things that are combined into one, things that are irrelevant now because something has changed. We need to keep it up to date. There's a backlog grooming. Ideally, you have someone that is managing the look of all your projects in your list, not just someone that's only focused on their business unit or their department. You want to be able to see it across. Limiting work in progress. We talk about this the most because of resource management and just honestly, people's ability to handle change. So avoiding overloading the team. So people working on 2 to 3 projects on top of their day-to-day job versus people working on 1 project versus people working on 20 projects, okay? So it's really important that we think about how many different projects can this person be working on and actually give quality attention to. And I would just say that individuals can handle different amounts. Some people do really well with 5 different projects and they're just providing their consulting expertise on these different things. Other people really want to deep dive and just be focused on this one project until it's complete. Be aware of your individual team members, of the needs of the organization, and the recognition that these projects oftentimes include change to different organizations and business units and teams. How many different changes can be stacked on top of each other for an organization, and then they can still continue on their day-to-day components. So timing is associated with this, number of different people on teams, and honestly optimizing. So we hear this a lot, being like, this person's the only person that can help on this. Well, that's an issue. That's an issue if you have one person that knows everything and their tribal knowledge and they're that single point of failure. So sometimes, right, having them on less things and ramping someone else up or something like that is a good investment. Sometimes not. Sometimes it is, you know what, we're not moving forward with this project because this person is a critical resource. They are not available. We are not bumping any of the other projects that they're on. We need to move forward. So being aware of the number of works in progress, the number of projects that are happening, who they're impacting in terms of different departments and things like that. All right, so we're going to talk about the different use cases right now. So scenario number 1, is a multinational corporation with a centralized EPMO, Enterprise Project Management Office. They have lots of very large projects interrelated across departments, across business units, And they're using the weighted scoring model or the project prioritization model, or in this case, actually Strong, to ensure alignment with the corporate objectives. So basically, all these different projects are getting weighted about what their priority is, what their risk is, what their complexity is, how much they think the budget's going to be, et cetera. There's a standardized process across the different global teams, the different business units, so that resource allocation, visibility, et cetera. So in this example, right, there's a requester, they're submitting a new project, there's a director, a budget owner, et cetera. They're going to go ahead and review it, make sure that it's correct. Then they go ahead and send it to a functional leader. Then it ends up in the executive team for a final approval. Okay, so different individual rankings, different people voting on how this goes, and then there's a final approval. Annual planning process, and Jason, I don't think we're out of time today, but I love your annual planning dashboard piece that you had included for yesterday's session. But this is a smaller organization, so it's balancing between their growth initiatives, things that they want to do to be able to scale, and the fact that they don't have a lot of budget. They don't have a lot of cash on hand. So they're implementing the Moscow prioritization. So they're basically saying like, okay, these are the critical projects. We don't have a choice. We have to fund these. What is the remaining budget and what could we do with this remaining budget? There's a clear decision-making process. There's strategic alignment on this is something that we must have. So the arguments are more, not the arguments, I'm sorry. The negotiations are about, is this a need or is this a want? Is this a must have versus a nice to have? And so that's the conversation, is about the project and the criticality of the project, and then using budget as the limitation factor for this specific organization. Make sense? And then, for example, for annual planning, you've got different submittals, and then there's a review and different things like that, making sure that you have enough time to get those different projects in and can be submitted through the intake form and reviewed before it goes to an enterprise-wide review and things like that. Resource management, we talked about this early on. It is the most critical aspect of this, but project-based organization. So in our case, we're a service-based organization. So professional services, we have different clients, and then different clients have different projects. In this example, it's an IT consulting firm that we worked with on a Microsoft project, and they were trying to balance their ongoing projects with limited people, and they were trying to make decisions about, okay, are we going to hire a contractor for this, or are we going to try to push this out, this client's implementation out? And that has impacts on customer satisfaction and when the revenue can come in and things like that, but they're less profitable if they're contracting out. So we use several different components of resource dependency chart, looking at individual resources and understanding that sometimes they can play multiple different hats. So someone can be a lead, but they can also be an engineer. Maybe we can get a contractor in for the project management aspect of it so that the engineer can do more of their specialization services, and that will free up some capacity. But, oh, hey, this person can't travel or things like that. So we started looking at roles, abilities, skills, upskilling existing people to do project prioritization. So the goal was to get the best resource utilization. So most of the time you're looking for what are those specialized skills, what are those things that only certain people can do, and then having a training planning around it, both for upskilling as well as what we should contract out and the costing associated with that and everything else. Okay. When we think about this, and just an example for Echo, right? Like, we help organizations implement project prioritization, PMOs, and really just work management solutions. So oftentimes our solutions are, there's some sort of standardized form for identifying work or requests, service delivery, marketing requests, et cetera. There's some sort of automation, there's some sort of communication flow associated with the different stakeholders and what they need to know at different points in the process. And then there's some sort of consistency reporting, apples to apples, across different business units, and so that everyone's not in their own little silos and it's hard to report up. The goal is always to have real-time collaboration with the team. So we don't want a situation that something goes in an inbox and sits for 2 or 3 weeks and no one can provide feedback or add additional information to it. Ideally, we want to know, if people are submitting something, we don't want them to go ahead and submit a duplicate or multiple people are working on the same thing and they don't realize it. So again, collaboration and seeing not just what my requests are and the things that I put in, but seeing what other people did too, because maybe I can piggyback on that and that can be an efficiency. And including across the organization. So not only certain people have ideas, but including a wider audience, but making sure that you, again, have a process associated with communication and clarification and things like that. Visibility, I want to see what, if I submitted something, put all that effort in, I want to see what's going on. We call it my work, my project, current user view. And then being able to see the progress. And then individual priorities. So ideally, one of the things that we do with Strongline, one of the things we do is that weighted prioritization method is really individuals can say how they think that this project impacts strategic goals. So you're not just doing it in a meeting where the loudest person or the person that, is a hippo, highest paid, loudest person, has their opinion about which project, but individuals can provide that perspective. So that's one of the things we're really excited about and that Strongline provides that UI for, is that individuals can provide their input on it. So in this solution, there's a lot of different tools we use. In this specific tool, we actually used a combination of Microsoft Smartsheet and Strongline all integrated together. So in this case, they really wanted to update an existing form that was in Microsoft, feed it into Smartsheet, which was their project management system. And then they ran it through Strongline for the voting methodology. They'd previously been on Miro, but we wanted to transition them onto a more robust voting. And when we're talking about like Echo solutions, tailoring the process methods to the unique workflows, I mentioned that throughout the presentation today. I just want to be clear, project prioritization doesn't need to be a heavy, intimidating thing. Everyone does it. We prioritize every day, our day and what we're working on and things like that. But having clarity around what the goals are, what we're working towards, and inspires confidence that the projects that we are working on are the most important and can help build buy-in and momentum in the organization and better results, more likely for project success. We do a lot of implementation of systems, work management systems. So Microsoft Smartsheet, Monday, Asana, Airtable, lots more. Those can really help with automating processes, shoring up your methods for prioritization. We also use some whiteboarding tools like the one that Microsoft has, but also Miro, Mural, Lucidchart, things like that, where you can vote, brainstorm, etc. What we do is we kind of help the whole process in different pieces depending on the client. So we can do anything from an initial assessment of like, hey, how is your organization currently prioritizing your work? Or what does your PMO currently look like? Or what does your annual planning currently look like? And then we can also say, okay, we think that this methodology makes the most sense based on these different user roles, groups, challenges that you specifically have. What tools are going to best support that so that you can actually keep it going and have it be dynamic and not have it be a hellish one-time annual thing. And then also training and ongoing support. So both for prioritization best practices, project management best practices, annual planning best practices, and honestly the tool if the tool implementation is part of that. So an example, helping a healthcare organization prioritize projects because there's a bunch of new compliance regulations coming in and it is going to change the priority of some of their ongoing projects. So what method do you use when you have all of these absolute dates associated with things, but you have a bunch of projects already in play? How's that going to impact it? So anyways, 4 minutes left, guys. I'm sorry. Again, a lot of content and it was kind of wordy for today, but my name is Yanus. I'm with Echolocity. Please don't hesitate to get in touch if you have any questions. I absolutely love project prioritization as a concept in strategic alignment and strategic planning. You can subscribe to our website. We issue content on a lot of these different topics. You're welcome to call or you can certainly email me. I have a Calendly that will say what my availability is if you're looking to meet with me. If you enjoyed this event, we will send out an email with the recording. So I think we had 12 people RSVP'd in this case, but we'll go ahead and send out the recording. We do have a YouTube channel that we post a lot of this on as well. You can subscribe to our YouTube channel. If you're interested in any of our events, even if you can't attend the moment that it's on, if you subscribe, we will go ahead and not subscribe. If you sign up for the event, we'll go ahead and send you the link to the recording as soon as you're available. And we typically send out the slides as PDFs as well, in case any of this information was useful for you today. I will stop for a moment. And if there are any other questions, concerns, etc., please do not hesitate to reach out. Again, my name is Molly Yanus, and I'm the founder and CEO at Echolocity. We're a work management organization that help teams find their flow. So work is constantly evolving. It's been a really crazy 5 years between AI and all the new tools and hybrid work and things like that. And so project prioritization, strategic alignment, absolutely critical with helping address burnout in organizations and making sure that we're putting our limited investment, our limited resources to the right things, and making sure that people understand the value. So anyways, I appreciate you joining today, and I will look forward to seeing you at one of our future events.
Molly,